Okay, good evening, folks. Dustin is out today, so I have the rare pleasure of being your acting chair this evening. Call the meeting to order. Staff or commissioners, are there any amendments to the agenda?
So on item 5, you will note that we've added the September 14th minutes that we pulled from the last one, and there have been some changes to it.
Okay.
And I'll speak a little more to that when we get to that item.
Okay, so that's on the agenda that's in front of me. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go to public comment. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak to the commission on any item that is not on the agenda. Yes, ma'am. Could you just identify yourself for the record?
Just swear him in. Yes, swear him in.
There's no swearing for non. I'm sorry, your name again?
Adele.
Hi, Adele. Okay.
And I live in Essex, and I'm really concerned about the mall, the outlet mall. I just can't approve of how many stories of apartments that the owner wants to put in. And if anything, you know, box stores or little stores, they just aren't doing very well anymore. So my feeling is that he just wants to get in there and put all these apartments in, and just for his benefit, because how are we going to benefit from that?
So just from a procedural standpoint, so there's no formal application for any proposed development at the Essex outlets at this point. The applicant came in for a conceptual discussion, which is allowed under the regs. So what you'd want to do is, I mean, Sharon will obviously capture this, but if you want to have that kind of comment impact a future development application, you'll want to participate when it actually comes in, if it comes in as an application.
Okay.
And then your comments would be recorded and considered as part of the application. But right now, all that's happened is some discussion. And you're aware of the Essex Town Center work that's being done, the study and community focus groups?
No, you know, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. So, go ahead, Ned.
The Essex Town Center is a group that's envisioning a kind of a wider spread than just the shopping center area and what is going to be done. And next Wednesday, from 4 to 7, there's an open house presentation, and that might be a good time to come. I'm not going to be here, but Dana can tell me where it is because I forgot.
Right here.
Is it right here? But that would be a good time to come and hear what some of the other ideas are for that, and to make your views known to another group of people also.
If the applicant ever does get to the point where there's an application filed, there will be many opportunities to weigh in throughout the process. All right, anything else? Okay, thank you. Anything from you, sir?
I keep my mouth shut.
I'm working on that. You probably have more experience than I do. Any other public comment? Okay, then what I would ask is anybody who is speaking on behalf of the next application, the public hearing, if you're going to be presenting or offering anything at all, if you would just please stand and be sworn in. Anybody else speaking on the application? No, just one? Okay, well then I guess I'm just swearing you in. It's painless. Do you swear the testimony you give is going to be honest and truthful to the best of your ability? Okay, great. Thank you. So next up, number 3 is the site plan public hearing for Richard Struble seeking to construct a 6,400 square foot multi-tenant commercial building, including other site improvements, located at 50 Gothier Drive in the Industrial I-1 zoning district, tax map 9, parcel 3-23, lot 50. Would you like the applicant to go first, or would you like to go first?
I think let's let the applicant go first.
Okay.
Give us a quick overview of the project.
So yeah, quick overview of the project, and on the staff report, just any areas of the staff report that you have issue with, you don't have to go through the whole staff report.
So.
And if you want me to flip to any plans on the screens too, so the audience can see, I've got them all up here.
I think this one's a good one. I think that's a great one.
If you would just identify your name for the record.
Sure. Greg Bombardier, Champlain Consulting Engineers.
Thanks.
This is the third time I've been in front of the board with this same project. Got it originally approved in 2012. And because of some economic concerns, it didn't get built. Came back in 2014. Same project. Same request. Approved. I got a one-year extension in 2016, 2017. And now I'm back for number 3. I was talking with Sharon earlier, and it says, feels like I was just here. Basically, what we've got, we're over in Gauthier Industrial Park, where the Sports and Fitness Edge is. And kind of drew a diagonal line with the Sports and Fitness Edge on one corner. This is in the way out back part of that. It's on a slope lot, 6,400 square foot, 3-tenant building, 25 parking spaces. We have currently a valid Act 250 permit, a state of Vermont potable water supply and wastewater permit, and a state of Vermont stormwater permit. All of our ancillary permits are still valid and in place. And we're here tonight to request reapproval of the project as presented. I've read through the staff notes. There really aren't any issues that I see with regard to some of the requests. I mean, one of the requests from the fire chief, he doesn't like the fact that we've got this steep bank in the back, but we really don't have much choice. I mean, this lot is a slope lot. We've got to cut into the side of the bank and establish a retaining wall in order to flatten a building pad. He doesn't like it. He recommended that the building be sprinklered. In fact, we've always anticipated the building to be sprinklered, so that was a non-issue. Apparently, we had one shrub or tree mislabeled on our landscaping plan. That needs to be adjusted, and there was a request for a tree in one of the islands as opposed to a shrub, a little bit of modification to our previous landscaping plan. No issues with that whatsoever. Trying to think if there's anything else that might have popped up here. Not much. The only thing that, and I'm not really taking issue with it. We've been in. This is, like I said, it's my third time. We've submitted the project a number of times, and there were some conflicting information in the review from Public Works. They talked about there only being one light on the site, when in fact there's like 17 or something. We've got building mounted lights, we've got pole lights in the parking lot. We discussed drainage, and you can see over at that plan on the wall, I've got the building in blue, and all of the impervious surface from the building in the parking lot ends up in that detention pond in the upper corner that's also shown as blue. And it was just either they were looking at an old plan or old review notes, but all that stuff had been cleaned up in 2012. And the plans, actually, revision notes reflect that from 2012 as well. So that's about all I have. It's the same project in the same spot, and we didn't really see anything that was something that we would take issue with in the staff notes.
Commissioners, any questions of the applicant before we go to staff? Okay, Darren?
Sounds like the applicant is perfectly pleased with the staff report, and that's all that I had to say. The only thing I would say to the commission is that you could condition the building be sprinklered, but if they're putting it in anyway, maybe not be necessary, but leave that up to you. We don't have any ability to regulate it, so.
Yep. And the fire chief signs off completely if it is sprinklered?
That's what he says. but
So, okay. What about 372 where Dennis is taking issue with the plans needing to be updated? Has that actually, is there still some confusion there? Because that memo was just a couple weeks ago.
so I believe, as the applicant said, everything that Public Works was concerned about was actually addressed. I put that in there to copy and paste from Public Works so that that was picked up, but I didn't. I think the elevation of the culvert and the drainage and the issue with the hay bales being used as erosion control have all been addressed. So I think they just didn't catch that in the new plans.
Okay. Any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Okay, take a motion to open the public hearing.
Move we open the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Public hearing's open. Does anybody from the public have any comments? Now I gotta swear you in. Well, go ahead and give me your comment.
I don't remember going through your driveways.
So it's off of, take Suzie Wilson Road, take a left to go towards Blakely Road.
Okay, I got it.
It's on the right there over by the edge.
Thanks.
We don't have to swear you in for that.
Who said, I didn't hear anything.
Take a motion to close the public hearing.
Move we close the public hearing.
Second. Motion seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I've got a couple
Motion
questions. Yeah.
Ned, the floor is yours.
I didn't see on the site utility plan any fire hydrants. Are there any, is there a fire hydrant off the water line in that area anywhere? I couldn't see carefully. It'd probably be on C3, yeah. Where's the nearest hydrant to the building?
Off your drive, let's go right down here. There you go.
Oops. There we go. Right in here.
It's just,
Right there, right on the edge.
it doesn't,
Maybe another one to go down.
you know, if the fire chief has a concern, it would be nice to know.
Oh, here we go, here's a hydrant here.
Okay.
So it's right down here.
Yeah.
Zoom back out again.
Okay.
See that guy? There we go. So you got a hydrant right there.
Okay. All right.
I think it'd be a good idea to add the condition of the sprinkler.
Is there room around the other three sides of the building? He says, the notes in the staff report says, we can't even use ground ladders or have sufficient standing room on the remaining sides of the structure. So with the reinforcing you're doing of the slopes in the area, do you have the ability to provide some room there for firefighting?
You've got enough room along the back of the building, on the bottom of the page, so that folks, there's 3 exit doors, so they can pop out of there. But those are pretty, it's pretty tight. The two sides of the building, there's some room on the right hand side, and clearly there's a bunch of room on the top. I guess if the chief wanted to fight a fire on the back of the building, you probably have to put his equipment up in Scott Pike's parking lot, up above on the top of the slope, and rain down on the thing. Pardon me? Pardon me, sorry.
Any other questions of staff or the applicant? Okay. Anyone prepared to take a stab at this?
I can do it. I move we approve the application for 50 Gothier Drive with the addition of one condition that the building be sprinkled. does the sprinkler have to be inspected and accepted?
Yeah, that'll all fall.
There's a state permit, right? So,
Mercy.
it's okay, so,
I'll second that.
Can I offer a friendly amendment before we go to discussion? Can we just do something under, around 404, just noting that at the meeting, the applicant and staff both noted that the inconsistencies noted by Public Works have been addressed? And as long as we're confident, I just want to make sure we leave here that those are, is that all right?
yeah, and that the fire chief was okay with the plan if it was sprinkled. It doesn't really say that.
You accept that friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I heard that the plans are gonna be amended for some minor tweaks or something, or is that already done?
No, then, I don't think there were any landscaping changes.
The island, tree island and all that?
That's in the staff report. The applicant is just saying they're okay with it.
Okay, but is it shown in the plan?
Oh, no, not in the plans, but,
So
yeah.
I'll just put that usual blurb under one, plans to be modified. A new set, plans to show the landscaping changes, if you want me to.
So did that get
Condition
copied?
3 is there.
Okay. Yep.
So condition 3 is there for the landscaping changes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Perfect.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Duggan. Welcome. Yeah, and so just so the rest of the commissioners know, Dustin and I did attend the select board meeting for Dennis Lutz's presentation on this, and what was I'm already forgetting what the other topic was. He did two things. He did the...
Water model thing.
That's right, water modeling, thank you, Dana.
Yeah.
Water and they were both, Dennis did a really nice job on both of those. So,
But you don't get Dennis, you just get me.
you will do an equally nice job, I'm sure.
I will do what I can. I'll try to keep it short. All right. So just quickly, this is going to be presenting a proposed sidewalk impact fee to you tonight. What I'm hoping to get out of it is just some general feedback, as well as your thoughts on what an appropriate fee might be. There's going to be a breakdown of different possibilities, different range of fees. And also there's a possibility of, if the ordinance is ultimately adopted, to write in some waivers for various things. So you can keep that stuff in mind as we go through it. Now this is basically, I think I've mentioned it in the past that we were working on this back when I was sitting in Darren's seat over there. But it's kind of a culmination of two things. One of them being that situation that you're all too familiar with when you're reviewing development applications, subdivisions, what have you, and the question comes up of there should be a sidewalk along a certain street, but who's going to pay for it? Is the developer required to put it in? Is the developer required to just provide an easement, leave it at that, for the town to deal with in the future? Is the developer required to give an easement and also contribute some sort of funds towards future sidewalks? Certainly when I was working with you guys and working on staff reports, it was always a struggle to figure out which to apply when. Just recently, some ones that come to mind were Route 15 with the Cloveward property on Upper Main Street, and high traffic area, desperately needs a sidewalk, but it's in the town plans. That's an area that should have a path in it of some sort, but struggled with figuring out what to require the applicant to do and put in. Garden Side Lane is another one, that project that's going up now at the corner of Susie Wilson Bypass and the Cirque and Route 2A. There's a question there of should there be a sidewalk installed in front of the project? Should there be an easement put in? Should there be a sidewalk installed further down the road to connect to that project? I think we landed on getting an easement with a sidewalk, or with a fee towards a future sidewalk in that area. So part of it, this whole project is to hopefully resolve some of those issues and just come up with a standardized, every project has to pay X amount of dollars based on the fee for the sidewalk impact fee. The second thing this brings in is the town and village bicycle pedestrian plan that was adopted about 2.5, 3 years ago. That was sort of the basis for identifying some of the priority sidewalk projects and doing some calculations that I'll get into in a little bit, to sort of take a look at that and say, there's a plan in place for some priority sidewalks, and this report is sort of going to be based off the results of that planning process that was done a few years ago. So, with that in mind, Dennis Lutz, Public Works Department, got a grant with the Regional Planning Commission. They hired RSG, an engineering firm, to do most of the work, be the consultant on this. So they presented the select board meeting the other night, but like I said, you have me tonight. Just quickly, an impact fee is a fee that's levied as a condition of issuance of a zoning or subdivision permit, used to cover any portion of the costs of an existing or planned capital project that will benefit or is attributable to the users of the development, or to compensate the municipality for any expense it incurs as a result of construction. It's permitted by Vermont statute. We have a recreation impact fee right now. This is, has to be based on findings, based on data, based on a need for infrastructure that the report gets into as we go through this.
Does that let you collect a fee to use somewhere else? So like Garden Side, if they collect a fee from them, build a path on the other side?
Yep. If it's set up, and this is the idea that this will be set up, is that it identifies 5, 10, 15 priority projects, but everyone would pay into it. So whether it's Garden Side Lane, whether it's homes at the end of Old Stage Road or Chapin Road that are never going to see a sidewalk, they still might be using those sidewalks in areas that they're more appropriate.
Okay. It's just that wording of that statute would be attributable to users of the development, or to compensate the municipality for this expense. So it's just, it doesn't sound like it would work.
It's somewhat of the recreation impact fee, which gets applied to residential development and is then can be turned into.
Well, that I think makes sense, but this, I think the sidewalk fee makes sense. But I just don't. That statute looks like it's worded this way.
Okay. Check on the language. Make sure they transcribe it correctly.
It's the way it is. I just don't know if it's perfect.
Greg,
The way we think it does.
you might want to check out what's called the rational nexus part of that statute, which is that indeed the fee that's levied should be connected to the impact of that development.
Yep.
It's called rational nexus. It was a big part of the impact fee ordinance, and you probably know about it.
Yeah, and the idea, and I'll get into it in a little bit, but the idea of this impact fee is basically that it's calculated based on the existing miles of sidewalks in town, and then it breaks into who's using them, residential users and commercial users, with the basically theory that all residential users might be using a sidewalk in a high priority area downtown, whether it's residential or commercial. So that's the nexus that comes in terms of this. But yeah, I'll check into that too. Thanks. This gets into the steps for identifying an impact fee, and again, sort of the nexus and the premise for how this one came to be. Identifying facilities and services that are affected by growth, identifying specific capital projects to be funded by the impact fee, developing formulas for that impact fee, and then writing it into ordinance. As I mentioned, this is the bicycle pedestrian plan that was adopted a few years ago. Now, this was calculated using a couple of different projections and estimates. One of them is population. The other one's going to be commercial space in town. So these are just some of those calculations and projections. Roughly 0.5% population increase is what we've been getting and can expect into the future. So commercial space was a little bit more tricky. You can see going back to 1930, it was kind of flat, increased a little bit, some ups and downs, and then in the past 5 years or so has skyrocketed. A little bit of a mix between what's out there and what to expect in terms of gut feel. My gut is that we're not going to keep going up like this. We'll probably be somewhere in between, so sort of the average of the past 10 years kind of captures we'll probably continue to still grow and add commercial space, but probably not quite as rapidly as the past couple of years. But with all those projections in mind, we're looking at probably 600 new residents and 1,400 new employees in the next 10 years. The number of employees is tied to commercial space. You can calculate or estimate number of employees based on square footage of commercial space. So that's where that 1,400 number comes in. This is looking at the existing level of service. That's when I was talking about the existing mileage of sidewalk, number of users in town, residential users, residents in town. Also the amount of commercial space, and you can calculate a level of service per 100 bedrooms, and level of service for square footage of commercial space. So those are the numbers that are there. The idea is to keep that level of service as you add population, add commercial space, and trying to keep that level of service from declining too much is where the impact fee calculation comes into play. If you start to go above that level of service, that's when the impact fee is probably too high, but we're not getting into that range. So that's where that came from. In terms of the project selection, this is going back to that bike ped plan that identified a whole number of projects across the town and the village. This is strictly looking at projects in the town, and all the numbers on that I was referring to in the past, I should have said earlier, are town outside the village. Those are those numbers. So that project identified up to about 15 projects, and the numbers up there, the table up there shows estimates of what those projects would cost if you did all 15 of them, anywhere down to 5 of them. Sidewalks are not cheap. So,
what does that stretch out per foot of sidewalk or per 100 feet of sidewalk?
Well,
my math is.
So it's over $1 million a mile. There's
Yeah.
1080 and a.
This is just for the bike ped plan. It's not doesn't include the new projects.
this is just based on the projects that were identified in the bike ped plan. Yep. So yeah, on the short end, if you do 5 projects, that's still a $3 million cost. Estimating a 20% match from the town, which is usually what we have to contribute for federal and state grants. So even just 5 projects is over $3 million, $600,000 from the town contribution. And that would add about 2.5 miles. At the high end, you're looking at 15 projects for $8.8 million total cost, town pitching in 1.8 million in matching costs. This is the list of the top 10 projects. I won't go through each of them, but they're part of the bike ped plan that I've been referencing. This gets into the formulas. There's a different formula for residential and a different form than there is for commercial space. The residential is based on number of bedrooms. Thinking that's a little bit more equitable than just doing it by homes. Looking at better calculation just from the residential phasing policy, 1 bedroom, approximately 1 person. So looking at doing it by different fees for a 1 bedroom studio apartment compared to a 4 bedroom home, just to sort of differentiate that a little bit. Commercial space is broken down by square footage, 1,000 square feet of commercial space. And I'll get into it a little bit, but even that commercial space is broken down further into types of commercial. So trying to make sure that a 10,000 square foot warehouse with 3 employees is not being charged as much or more than a 5,000 square foot office space with 20 employees. Part of the calculation also went into who's projected to use the sidewalks as they're built out. Consultant put together some numbers, and basically the funding responsibility, to summarize, 64% of that funding responsibility will fall on residential users and 36% on the commercial users. This gets into feet of impacts of the bedrooms, the types of commercial space. For commercial, broke it down into accommodations, that's your hotels, stuff like that. Commercial space, office, those types of uses, industrial space, retail space, so different formulas or different, same formula, but different potential fees for each of those uses depending on their level of impact. This is sort of the key chart and takes a look at what the fees might break down to. On the residential side, looking at the top 5 projects, and we're up to all the projects and somewhere between. So this is where we have a little bit of leeway, flexibility to figure out what's the appropriate number. And that's going to be based on what is politically acceptable as well as what can we kind of expect to project out in the next 10 years of how many grants we're going to get to do some of these projects. So just to give a range, top 5 projects, total project cost, $3 million. The town contributing about 20% to the local match. Breaks down to about just over $100 per bedroom, $106 per bedroom that comes on. Commercial space, it's an average of $73 per 1,000 square feet of commercial space, but that varies a little bit based on the breakdown of accommodation, commercial, retail, industrial, warehouse. High of $117 per 1,000 square feet for your office professional buildings, down to $28 for your hotels, group housing, $96 for retail space. Contrast that if we did all 15 projects, which is not likely just based on our grant history and the cost of it, you're looking at $700 a bedroom, and an average of $490 for 1,000 square feet of commercial space. So I think that's unlikely. Probably, we say 5 is a reasonable expectation of projects to do, somewhere between 5 and 10, which gives you the average, and that'd be about $290 per bedroom, average of $200 per 1,000 square feet of commercial space. So that's something to consider and give feedback on. What do you think makes sense in terms of projects coming in, but also, what's a reasonable fee to tack on to development that as it comes in. And lastly, the way this is calculated, there are some credits to make sure people aren't getting taxed twice. So every year the town puts aside about $40,000 in its capital budget for sidewalks and paths. The consultant came up with a calculation to give credit for that. So house comes on the market and is built, they pay their residential sidewalk impact fee, but then they're also paying property taxes that go towards future sidewalk construction, so it's a credit against those future taxes that would reduce the fee initially. Waivers and exemptions, town can consider offering waivers for things we want to incentivize, affordable housing, energy efficiency, those types of things. So that's also another way to potentially reduce the fee to encourage certain things that we want to encourage from the planning perspective. So right now, the select board saw this presentation last week. Darren presented it to the Conservation and Trails Committee this week. I presented it to the Economic Development Commission. They're going to give me some feedback probably at their next meeting. Here I am tonight with you guys, so trying to collect some of that input to bring it back to the select board and figure out how to move forward, if we move forward, and kind of looking at what the appropriate fee value should be, if there's any waivers that should be considered or written into the ordinance, and then putting the ordinance into place. So, happy to answer questions, take feedback.
230.
Little feedback for you. And I'm looking at this, sidewalk assessment basically, which seems to be falling fairly heavily on the non-residential side. I'm looking at Dennis Lutz's new water program toy, which is going to cost the town probably $40,000 over time. We have sign regulations. We need to put it all together and figure out some way to encourage development instead of building and adding on all these little roadblocks to development. I don't think the town is going in the right direction with that. I think they're basically trying to figure out a way to raise revenue, but I think it's a nickel and dime approach. And I also have a question, since you're on the floor. I'm reading in the reporter the thing on the town water model, and it says here, it says staff will also require the model whenever projects are cited in areas with potential deficiencies in water service, or whenever it's in the town's best interest. How do you define, who defines what determines is in the town's best interest? Is there a set of criteria to do that, or do you want to fight with the lawyers forever determining that?
Yeah, so Dennis and Aaron put together, for the water model first, and I'll respond to that. For the water model piece, they put together 4 criteria as to when it would be applied, and I forget the first 3, but it was, I won't even speak, 'cause I forget what the first 3 were. But the last one was when deemed to be in the best interest of town, and they sort of put that in as a catch-all. They said it'd be the 1% of the time. The other 3 criteria are 99% of the time.
Who makes that determination then? Dennis getting up on the right side of the bed or not? Or, or liking the color that the plans are printed on? Those are the kind of open ends that make it very hard to develop things.
Yeah, the 1% of the time that it's used, I guess we'd have to hash that out. The other 3, I wish I had it in front of me, but they were pretty clear and pretty specific as to when it would be
I can
applied.
understand, the other things, but,
Yep.
I'm still looking at a hole there that may at some point come back and bite somebody.
The argument that Dennis made was that this approach is actually less expensive for an applicant than asking an applicant to model the water issues on their own. So like, for instance, doing something up at the town center and saying to an applicant, you have to prove that there's enough fire flow, go out and model the whole system. They can't afford to do that.
You still got to model the fire flow for a specific building. Developer has to do that anyway.
Right.
But it's so,
He has to do it before he can start building.
so Dennis said that they ran the water model fee by most of the engineers in town and had positive feedback on it. It's more accurate, it's more upfront, it's a set fee that they can expect. It's as opposed to somebody trying to come in and figure out what the model might be on a certain part of town and just the town center. This would factor it into everything. The town spent $20,000 to get that water model fee built. The fee that would be put on to developers and would be a one-time fee to recoup some of the cost. I think it'd be $250. I forget the exact number, but $250. And then depending on the size of the development, a one-time cost to run it, which is basically a pass-through. Town doesn't see that. It's passed through to the company that has the water model and be using it. So it's more for the developer. It's upfront for them. It's a clear cost. It's not an engineer with the wildly fluctuating cost, and it's more accurate for the town and the developer.
Is there room in that system for the proposed developer to challenge what the model says? The model parameters are predetermined, but are they existing parameters or are they ideal parameters? How do you determine your baseline for that? Is there a baseline model right now that will tell you exactly what all the pressures and the flows are, say, in the town center area? Do we have that now?
I believe that's what the model is. I'll have to check and get back to you on it, but I'm almost positive that the model is what's out there now, and you can, based on what's here now, and somebody wants to put in a 10-unit apartment building over here, then that's going to plug into that model, and everything else is going to do this, and you can figure out what the pressure's going to be down the line.
And the other piece of the model that I found interesting was that it's continually self-improving because it uses the new data inputs, the hydrant testing, all the things that happen on a regular basis through Public Works. It uses to continually update itself. So whatever that model's run, it's the latest as of whatever just happened, which I thought was interesting. Literally get everybody on the same page.
And if I can follow up on the sidewalk fee piece and additional costs there, it's an additional cost that's going to developers and probably getting passed on to tenants and residents and everything else. But I like to think that the way this is being set up is it's it sets a standard, it clarifies what that is, like I started off with. Every single time a project comes in that requires a sidewalk, there's a debate at this table with Public Works, with the applicants trying to figure out what's appropriate, when is it appropriate, how much is appropriate, should it be construction, should it be a fee that's calculated based on the costs of the moment. This sets that up. It's a clear standard as to what they can expect and what they can pay. The developer, I can't remember if it was at the presentation in the select board meeting, I can't remember if it was Dennis or if it was the consultant, but basically said most of the towns in the county are going in the direction of transportation impact fees. And, they're the models that are being considered and adopted elsewhere incorporate the sidewalk component into transportation. This breaks it out. It's a little bit more transparent, so you can see where those dollars are going as opposed to a general transportation impact fee. So, yes, it's an additional cost. Whole county's trying to deal with it, whole state. I like to think it's a cost that we can point to and have reasons for enacting it.
So if we had this in place, would that mean we wouldn't expect the developers to put in sidewalks?
Nope. So it would still be, the idea is that this applies to those priority projects. So whether it's the top 5 or top 10 or whatever we get, would be going towards those priority sidewalks. Now, the zoning regulations talk about if you put in a new public road, you need to put in a sidewalk or 2 sidewalks, depending on the extent and the traffic of that road. That would still be required. If a development is going in along one of those priority sidewalks, the developer would be required to build that sidewalk along that project. They'd get credited, so they wouldn't have to pay the fees.
So overall would have to put in the sidewalk, I would think.
They would have had to, the way this is being considered and proposed.
Okay.
Yep.
If it's not, if there's an internal road off a main road, if not, the main road isn't a priority project, then what happens over the
If the main road is not a priority project, then we'd collect the fees and they'd be applied to a priority project elsewhere.
So I have a proposed exemption.
Okay.
It's an apples and oranges thing, but I think it'd be nice to have an exemption if they meet the high performance host energy standard or any, the Vermont energy
Efficiency.
efficiency Vermont. They have a high performance house. So it meets that. Which is weird to tie that to sidewalks, but.
No, that's waivers,
Yeah.
incentivizing.
Could do it for low income housing.
I have a question, and maybe you just answered it and it didn't say. If there's a project that's not in one of the 15 identified places, and they were required to put in a sidewalk, do they still pay?
If it's
Yeah.
a
If it's not
a
in-
sidewalk that's not part of the priority sidewalk path
They
project
put it
list,
in.
then they would have to put in the sidewalk and pay towards a future thing.
And then my other comment is, boy, I'd rather see it based not on bedrooms, and the reason for that is when we had the school impact fee, people would say they're building a 2-bedroom, and off the top of my head, from memory, a 2-bedroom school impact fee was like $238. A 3-bedroom was like $1,038. A 4 and up was $2,800 something bucks, and everybody put in 2 or sometimes 3, but oftentimes throughout the years since I've been here, the penalty for that is they do an after-the-fact permit because we no longer have a school impact fee, so it costs them $60 to bring their permit up to say that they're trying to sell it for 3 or 4 bedrooms, whatever it is. So I'd rather somehow have an average that, everybody just pays a fee.
Yeah.
Or a call-out will also be considered part of, calculated into the fee.
Or maybe a square footage instead of bedroom.
You could do it on square footage, or you could do it on the wastewater permit, number of bedrooms on the wastewater permit, that way they can't back in, because I have that same note. Then they can't back in the system. They got a 3-bedroom septic and only want to build a 2-bedroom house, that's fine.
Square footage I like.
Greg, I'm interested in what the Economic Development Commission's reaction to yet another fee was. And also, if you know where Essex stands in the region as far as the fees that we heap on developers. I sort of share Ned's concerns that it's getting awfully expensive to develop in Essex.
Yep.
And are we deterring good development?
Similar question from Economic Development Commission, and it's, what are the fees elsewhere in town? They weren't necessarily opposed to this, but they did have questions about what it means in terms of competition for Essex versus other towns, and would this scare someone to go to Colchester, Williston, Milton, somewhere else instead of coming to Essex? I have to dig into that. They were going to get me some more formal comments at their next meeting next week, I believe.
Terrific.
Any other feedback?
So
I think it's good, because we need to get, there's like some of the trails that are passed. It's good.
Yeah, and this isn't for, the unimproved primitive paths, it's really just the priority sidewalk stuff. I can certainly take back what I've heard tonight, anywhere from too many fees and let's not bother to some of the waivers and different considerations for the bedroom. If you wanted to do something more formal at your next meeting and submit some written comments to the select board, I'm happy to take those as well.
It's the pleasure. Folks want to...
Do you think we should, or do you think this is good?
It never hurts to have, commission speaking as one, or even if you're not all on the same page, but at least to have general comments. Otherwise, it's me taking it back and passing it on, and I'm happy to do so, but similar to what I used to do and Darren does now with conservation and trails, passing comments up. It's one thing to hear it from the staff person, it's another thing to hear it from the actual commission. So if you can do it as a board, I think that'd be a little bit stronger, but whatever works for you.
Can we agree?
Could a waiver include, I'm just trying to think of the comments that Ned and Dana just made with so many fees and everything, that maybe a waiver could include at the planning commission's discretion, if they have to put in a sidewalk that's not in the identified places, that a waiver be granted, depending on how big it is. A sidewalk of a little bit versus a pretty good path, before it all tanks, not that it would, but just a suggestion.
I think we could consider it, then I think you open the door to that 1% of the water modeling fee that Ned is referring to. When do you grant a waiver? Is it based on the mood of the board on a certain day?
I guess, but if you've got somebody at the table who's putting in a pretty good size sidewalk in front of their development, that doesn't have to happen to meet the 15 projects. So I don't know, I kind of look at it as double dipping a little bit.
It's tough because, speaking as someone who does building, it's, if you go in for a single lot that doesn't require Act 250, you pay a fraction of the fees. The minute you cross the Act 250 threshold, I just did it on one of my project expansions. I wrote like 3 checks to the state for just permit fees, and they were expensive, so.
So ours look cheap by comparison?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, yes, but if someone came in and was just doing a 2-lot, peeling off a couple lots off of Brigham Hill, and they never had to go to the state, they literally, their permit fees are really just limited to this table. They cross the Act 250 threshold, and they're writing checks for thousands of dollars, and that's when I think developers get a little antsy, is they just see the checks going out. But in theory, those larger projects, the profit, not that that's our job, but in theory, they have a lot more to gain than someone just peeling off a couple lots. So I struggle. It's, I don't know if we have a position. It'd be nice to hear Dustin and John's take on it too. So is it worth putting this on? Do we have time to put it on our next meeting?
You meet again the
I think.
26th. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, select board won't see us again until at least November, so give me some time.
So could we throw this on for a spirited discussion? And in light of what sort of Ned was saying, just in general, the kind of maybe a step back, looking at all the kind of landscape of fees.
It's a valid concern. We hear it, we go to the Building Homes Better campaign, and part of the impediment to affordable housing, or even just, housing that people can afford, is the fees. At the same time, they're there to help the town provide a service to the residents and users coming in, so it's hard.
Yeah. The challenge, the pushback I have on that is there doesn't, even if you eliminate those fees, you just don't see, maybe you guys have examples of them, I just don't see areas in Vermont where they're like stuffing in affordable housing and knocking it out of the park, either because fees don't exist or because the right environment's there. So like to have this premise that if we don't do the fees, the affordable housing, we just can't seem to get it.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that.
No, I know.
It's one of the many components towards not just affordable housing,
Yep.
but enough housing,
Oh, yeah.
and housing that people can afford, including the quote-unquote affordable by definition housing.
One more question. Greg, I'm curious also, and you might not know the answer to this, is when is it in the town's best interest to pay for infrastructure instead of passing it on to developers? Some towns actually pay for improvements. And I don't know which towns do it. When is it appropriate for a bond vote, a sidewalk bond vote, a water tower bond vote, a ladder truck bond vote? I don't understand these things, but sometimes towns pay for kinds of growth, especially in their areas that are designated for growth.
TIFs, TIFs are, that's that whole concept of create that, make a decision as a town and put it on everybody and create that area.
Right, and now TIFs are back.
Right.
And might that be something that we should consider? Personally, as a community development director, I'd like to see a little bit more public investment in our areas designated for growth. But I wouldn't necessarily go to the select board and say that.
No, and I as one person can't speak for when the town is ready to put in public investment. Might be a good question to ask as you do the ETC Next project of, some of the development that's coming might require public investment. What are people willing to spend and on what? That might give a better sense.
These are big picture.
Big picture.
Planning. Anything else for us, Greg?
No, that's it. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Nice to have you back. Thank you. All right.
Greg, are you gonna have that town by town comparison soon, or is that?
Good question. If I get it in time for your next meeting, I will pass it on.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Okay, in your packet, you have the minutes of September 14th and September 28th. Miss Kelly, did you?
So I just wanted to point out that before your seats, I placed
Thanks, folks.
a new copy that was presented to me from Irene Renner, who emailed them over, and she has some suggested changes. So I just want to bring that to your attention to see how you want to go forward with that at this time. A couple of them, I will say that I had already noticed for myself. For example, on the September 28th, line 105, Commissioner I think it says Manger. I had changed that one. And there was one other one that was a typo that I changed.
What Dave Kilby's name?
Well, Dave Kilty, her suggested change on Dave Keelty, the sign-in sheet to me looked like KEA. I don't know the guy. She knows the guy. Maybe she knows that was the right spelling, but,
I think it's K.
right.
On the
Again,
application, so.
on the application. Okay, yeah. I didn't run to do all that checking when I just used the sign-in sheet. So I have placed a note on the sign-in sheet to please print, so that we can check these things. I know that in past, people have just put their initials like JD, or SK Kelly, and she'll send me those type of corrections as well, so.
So,
Her corrections are in red.
okay. So are these coming as requested edits from the select board, from a concerned citizen? I mean, how are these?
I don't know, I honestly don't know. They come to me via email. I don't know if she's doing this as her capacity as select board member or landowner. It doesn't say one way or the other. It's just an email from Irene.
I mean, my personal feelings are, easy changes like a spelling mistake or something is at your discretion as the recording secretary. When we start getting into content, I almost feel like we need a discussion similar to the one we had about when we amend minutes as all 7 of us here, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
Can we put this on for a future?
Yeah. If all 7 of us are here on the 26th, we can talk about it again. In the past, you have granted the liberty of, if I've made a mistake of, like, Keelty, for example, if further research shows it's KEA or KEE, go ahead and just change it. A comma should have been a semicolon, go ahead and do it. We don't really need to have you guys saying, calling those things out, I don't think.
Right. What are other people's thoughts?
Well, I'm looking at September 28th ones, specifically line 47. You're saying the red is
Her words are
her words?
added.
So outdated, hard to access. I don't know where that's coming from, as Dave was saying. That's something that was on the recording.
Well, it
And
may
it's, and
have.
it, well, that's why we don't know.
Right.
If it's her personal impression of something that was important on the recording that we didn't put in, then that is a whole discussion piece about
Right.
what we're choosing to put in, as opposed to, you missed a comma here, you missed a semicolon.
Right.
So I'm basically seconding what
Yeah.
Dave said, but that's a good example of
Yeah.
that. Like, outdated, hard to access is almost an editorial comment if we don't know
Right.
how it came to be added to our minutes, as a suggestion.
That's a good.
Yeah, I can't, the statutes that Josh brings up, I don't remember, and I don't think any of us do what the exact words should be in there, and, I don't think it's something we ought to change. Now, on line 129, you might want to call me Commissioner Daley, just to be consistent with everything else that's in there.
Well, that's what-
I really don't care.
Right.
You can call me whatever you want,
I'm sorry.
It's on the tape.
So, exactly, I mean, I think you are all saying the same thing from what I'm hearing.
I think so. I think we need to have a larger discussion, and I think for me, because I get to sit in this chair tonight, for me, this goes back to the Facebook and other issues we've had in the past. I just want to know if these are coming as official changes if they're from the select board, then, we take a certain amount of direction from them. But I just want to make sure we have a consistent process so that whether it's a select board member or member of the public, we're just handling this consistently, and to Josh's point, that we don't have to second guess intent, because you don't want to be spending this kind of time on minutes. And I also don't want the minutes to suffer as a result, where we start saying, okay, that's it, we're just going to capture what we're required to by statute, which are motions, who made them, and what the resulting vote was.
Which we're getting closer and closer to.
Do you have any thoughts?
I think if it were, we should treat input from citizens as comments, as public comments. And if it comes in before we approve the minutes and we think it's correct, I don't see why not.
Yeah, and to Josh's point, I think that's easy. If there's, you could easily run down these and go, yep, spelling error, yeah, absolutely do that. But then when it starts to get where Josh was pointing out, it's like, I don't remember that, and I'm not going to spend an hour here trying to play back a tape and make Sharon go back and find out if it really was outdated, hard to access or not.
And even the grammaticals, you don't even really need to call out with just that open, understanding that, okay, go fix the spelling or something.
Right. I think it would be nice to tighten up our policy. If we need to formally authorize you to do that kind of stuff, maybe we should formally authorize that. you've been our recording secretary forever, you can fix a typo error without needing this body's blessing. So,
Well, your operating procedures are coming back to you, so maybe we'll
maybe,
throw something in.
all right, so can we agree that we'll take a look at these? Okay. So that being said, so thank you, Sharon. So for this round, are people okay with Sharon correcting
The grammatically.
the typos in terms of name spelling and giving Commissioner Daley the due respect he deserves by saying
I wasn't
Commissioner?
here for the other meetings. I don't know what you're putting out.
Well, Commissioner Daley one will go away because that was added.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll put this on for future, so can we entertain a motion for the minutes, either individually or together?
I move we approve them all.
So a motion to approve the September 14th and September 28th minutes.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Any other business?
One on mine and none. You got it?
Okay, great.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion adjourned, seconded. All those in favor?
Right.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
7:34.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Shut off your mic, please.